This is going to be chapter 7 and 8 in Unit 2, going with the American Revolution. Okay, this has a lot of information in it, so just kind of hang in there. So, you have the First Continental Congress. This is going to be one of the first united political responses to British aggression. The delegates are going to meet in Philadelphia to protest intolerable acts and to assert their rights as Englishmen. While they're still loyal to the crown at this time, they agree to boycott the British goods, and they're going to send the petition, the Olive Branch petition, to King George III. At this time, they're still hoping to avoid conflict. So this is a critical moment with the colonial, they're all coming together, unifying, laying the groundwork for their future resistance. This again is before the war, kind of doing a bit of a review. And by 1775, the British are still not being flexible. They still believe that the colonies are being radical and they're kind of at their breaking point. This talks about what we discussed in the last lecture with General Thomas Gage. He's the Royal Governor of Massachusetts. He is going to receive orders from the British Crown to seize the colonial weapons. They're stored in Concord. That's going to cause Paul Revere and William Doss to go and do their midnight ride, and they're going to warn the militias. You're going to have the troops in Lexington. You're going to have the militia surrendering, and then you're going to have the shots fired. And still the debate is who fired first. That started everything. You have the outbreak of war. You have the fire of the Liberty Pole, which then spreads to the courthouse. So this is going a little bit deeper into some of the battles and more the political ideology that was going on. So, following the retreat from Concord, you have the different militias surrounding Boston, and they're going to evict Gage and his troops. They then fortify Bunker Hill in Charleston, which we discussed last lecture. They send the 2,000 plus troops, take their positions, and force them to leave, the British troops. They're also going to demonstrate to the British that although they're just a colonial force and a small force, they can still inflict some damage and create some issues for the British Army. The Second Continental Congress is going to meet very soon after Lexington and Concord. And the tone is going to shift dramatically. The delegates now are going to transfer their alliance from the British Crown to the Congress itself, to the colonists. They'll create the Continental Army. George Washington will be the commander. They're going to start different military preparations. They're still hoping to avoid war. They will invade Canada, and they're hoping to pressure the British Crown into negotiations. That, of course, is not going to happen, and so they're going to have to eventually go to war. One of their final attempts, like we learned in the last lecture, was send in the Olive Branch petition to King George III, hoping to avoid war, and that's when the king, in August 23rd, 1775, the king will declare that the colonies are in open rebellion, kind of not giving the colonies very many choices moving forward. Okay, so in 1776, the Crown, the British Crown, they're going to escalate their conflict. They're going to do some legislative issues. They're going to cut off the American commerce. They're going to seize any type of ships. They're going to have the German mercenaries. They're going to have the governor of Dunmore. He's going to offer freedom to enslaved people if they come and they fight on the British side. And then you have Thomas Paine's Common Sense, arguing for independence, all of these things that are going to lead up to Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence and the colonists being an actual revolt. You have, after they declare independence, you have the Congress kind of scrambling to try and figure out some type of framework on how to govern. You'll have Richard Henry Lee is going to propose a confederation of the states. That's going to give us the Articles of Confederation. So the Articles, though, they're going to be they're going to create a very weak central government, and it has no executive and has very limited authority. Each state had one vote, and the major decisions required a supermajority. So while it was kind of effective during wartime, the Articles are going to be very inadequate when trying to manage a nation that's growing and trying to create a strong government. So after the Revolutionary War, the United States is going to face severe economic instability under the Articles Confederation. We just talked about it being very weak. The federal government is going to lack the power to tax or regulate commerce, and taxing is how governments pay to function. So this is going to leave the states to manage their own financial crisis. So in like Massachusetts, farmers, many of whom were unpaid war veterans, they're going to be crushed by debt and high taxes. The courts are going to begin to seize their land, which is their livelihood. So you have what's called Shays' Rebellion. Daniel Shay, he was a former Continental Army captain. He leads this rebellion to shut down the courts and stop these foreclosures because they're taking their livelihood, their farms, because they're taxing them and they can't pay. So the rebellion eventually is suppressed by a state militia, and this is going to send shockwaves through the country. National leaders fear that the government was too weak to maintain order or protect property rights. So Shays' Rebellion became a wake-up call, and it's going to expose these deep flaws that are in the Article of Confederation. So in response to that, you have 55 delegates from 12 states. They're going to gather in Philadelphia in 1787. Originally, they want to revise the Articles, but what happens is they quickly agree that they just need to let the Articles go and create a new constitution. So George Washington was chosen to preside over the convention, and he is one of the people that helps produce this framework for a strong federal government with 3 branches and a system of checks and balances. Checks and balances is like the government that we have today, where one power, the executive, legislative, and judicial, one power is not stronger than the other power. You check on each other and you make sure everybody's balanced. So one of the pivotal moments for the United States is going from a very fragile confederation into this unified republic. And the word republic means not a monarch, without a king, is what the word republic means, ruling without a king. So we're going to start to see this unification and this desire and capability to govern ourselves and to create some stability. That's what the goals are. Okay, so the founding of the American Republic, which we have, was very steep in contradictions. So we're going to have this issue of the Declaration of Independence. It is going on John Locke's ideas, his social contract theory, that the state of nature, you are free. Anybody born should have certain rights that no one can take away, and that's the right to freedom, liberty, equality. And so this is going to be challenged when it comes to slavery. Slavery remains legal. Women and black people and Native Americans don't have any basic rights, and they're still denied basic rights. So it comes down to, and this question will come up again in the Civil War, is when our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, eventually Bill of Rights, who are you defining as a citizen? Because women don't get the right to vote until 1920. So these issues are going to come back up as who do you decide is a citizen? Is it just the white European male? So you're going to start having some different disagreements. Many leaders are going to fear that too much democracy and favor ruled by property owning elites is going to be an issue. You start to have tensions that reveal that the ideas of liberty and equality are more aspirational than practical and fully realized. So after the revolution, the U.S. is going to face serious economic issues. Articles of Confederation gave most of the power to the states, leaving the federal government unable to raise revenue and to force different things, to enforce laws. Shays' Rebellion, which is going to be a farm-led uprising in Massachusetts, is going to highlight some of the dangers of a system that's not really fair and free to everybody, but more just to certain people. But it's going to be a wake-up call for leaders that reform is necessary. So the Constitutional Convention, it's a turning point. Though originally intended to revise the Articles, the delegates quickly agree to create a whole new government. The resulting Constitution establishes a federal system with 3 branches, like we had talked about. Still, there's a fear that even though they're creating this new Constitution, it might give too much power to the federal government. To secure it, it has to be ratified. And they also want to add protection for individual rights, which is going to be the Bill of Rights. It's going to be added in 1791. And then they're going to add amendments to guarantee that essential freedoms are still there, and they're going to even define the limits of government authority. So again, it's freedoms for who is still going to be the question, because it's still going to exclude a large portion of the population. However, the farmers often prioritize stability. They're used to elite control, but it's going to be defined in overall who is going to participate in this new democracy. So the new government's going to take shape. You're going to have political divisions. You're going to have certain people like Alexander Hamilton. He's considered a federalist. He wants a strong central government and a commercial economy. You're going to have Jefferson, who is considered a Democratic Republican. He wants to decentralize power and rule values. So you're going to have these debates start to take shape in this early republic, and it's really going to lay the foundation for what becomes America's two-party system. So before Washington, he's going to be the first president. So before Washington's presidency, your main leaders are going to be Washington, Hamilton, and Jefferson. Okay, so they're all going to play this crucial role in shaping the new republic. Washington's leadership is going to give legitimacy to the new government. Hamilton's big thing is he's going to push for a national bank and a strong federal power. Jefferson is going to champion a more limited government and more power to the farming society, they're going to have very different visions. And this is going to come up, and it's really going to define American politics for decades to come. So, to make the Constitution functional, Congress has to pass key laws. They passed a Judiciary Act, creating a federal court system, ensuring legal consistency across all the states. A Tariff Act, which is going to help fund the government and protect American manufacturing. These type of laws are essential in translating constitutional principles into practical governance. So the early republic was a work in progress, okay? Leaders faced huge challenges, economic, political, ideology. They're all creating something different than what they were raised under, which was the crown, a monarchy, a king leading. So while their ideas of liberty and equality were central, they were very unevenly applied. I'm not even sure they knew how to apply them correctly. So compromises are going to be made during this period. It's going to shape the nation's identity. It's also going to lay a foundation for future struggle and progress. So the ratification of the Constitution in 1788, it marks a whole new era. The Articles of Confederation had been proven too weak. The new framework created a stronger federal system with an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. In 1789, the first national elections were held, and George Washington was unanimously chosen to lead the new republic. His presidency would set crucial precedents for future American governance. So Washington's presidency was foundational. So he creates a cabinet to advise him. He's going to include key figures like Thomas Jefferson, who will be the Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of Treasury. He's going to emphasize neutrality, especially in European conflicts, and voluntarily step down after 2 terms. He establishes a tradition of peaceful transition and limited executive power. His refusal to be called His Majesty reinforces this break from the monarchy. Alexander Hamilton's financial plan aimed to stabilize the economy and strengthen the federal authority. Hamilton's going to propose a national bank. He's going to assume state debts, and he's going to introduce tariffs and taxes, which is going to include the controversial whiskey tax. They like their whiskey. So these measures help build credit and unify the economy, but they're also going to have some really deep political divisions, especially with Jefferson, who feared centralized power. The Whiskey Rebellion is going to be one of the first tests of the new government's strength. So the Western farmers protest Hamilton's whiskey tax, and violence erupts. Washington personally leads federal troops to suppress the rebellion. So this is going to show that the government will and can enforce laws across the states, unlike what was happening under the Articles of Confederation. So this is a very defining moment for the government and for the federal legitimacy. Okay, foreign policy and neutrality. So foreign policy was very delicate during Washington's presidency. So after the American Revolution, it's going to inspire the French Revolution, because remember, the French fight with the Americans. They also lend money to the colonists. So the French also have a huge war debt, and they're going to start taxing their society, which is going to create the French Revolution. So Washington issues the Proclamation of Neutrality. This is in hopes to avoid any type of entanglements with European wars. Jay's treaty with Britain helped prevent conflict, but was very unpopular with many who felt it favored the British and what the British wanted way too much. So these decisions reflected Washington's very cautious diplomacy. Despite Washington's hope for unity, political factions emerged. You have the Federalists led by Hamilton. They're going to favor strong central government and a commercial economy. The other group is going to be the Democrat Republicans. They're going to be led by Jefferson. They want states' rights. And then you have the final part of this is Washington's farewell address, which famously warns against the dangers of political parties, foreign alliances. Washington's presidency was really laid in the foundation for the American Republic. He balanced power, he avoided war, he reinforced the constitutional authority. His voluntarily departing from the office was unprecedented, and it really showed that a leader should lead in a more peaceful transition, and that leadership in a republic is temporary and there's accountability to the people. Okay, John Adams is the next president. The election of 1796 was the first to feature competing political parties. Adams is a Federalist. He won the presidency while his opponent, Thomas Jefferson, became the vice president due to electoral rules. So whoever you went against, the winner was the president and the other one was the vice president. Not sure that would work very well now. So Jefferson becomes the vice president. This creates a divide in the executive. The presidential is the executive, because you have two leaders with opposing ideologies. Okay, the president feels one way and the vice president feels the other. The Federalists favored strong central authority and elite leadership, while the Democrat Republicans are going to push for broader democratic participation and more stronger state rights. So Adams faces a major foreign crisis with France, which felt like a betrayal by the Americans' neutrality. It's called the XYZ affair. French agents demand bribes just to begin negotiations. And this scandal is going to outrage Americans and lead to this series of naval skirmishes in the Caribbean. Despite calls for full war, Adams chooses diplomacy and he signs a treaty in 1800. His restraints helped preserve peace but cost him politically. So in response to the anti-French hysteria, Congress passed the Alien and Sedition Acts. These laws gave the president sweeping powers to detain or deport foreigners and punish dissents. Those are people who are against the country. Several Democratic Republican editors and even a congresswoman, or congressman, sorry, there was no congresswoman, a congressman were arrested. So critics argued that the laws violated the First Amendment, and this executive authority was actually very dangerous. The acts just deepened the partisan divides, and it just fueled fears of tyranny and deeper political division. Jefferson and Madison respond to the Alien Sedition Acts with the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. These documents claim that states had the right to nullify federal laws that they deemed unconstitutional. So a state could cancel a federal law that they did not think was constitutional. Why the idea of nullification didn't gain traction at the time, it planted seeds for future debates over states' rights and federal authority. This is going to be something that is argued as we lead up to the Civil War. The election of 1800 is a turning point in American democracy. Despite intense political conflict and personal attacks, The election resulted in a peaceful transfer of power from the Federalists to the Democratic Republicans. Jefferson's victory marked the first time in history that leadership changed hands between opposing parties without violence. A powerful affirmation of Republican ideas. Adams' presidency was marked by tension and controversy. He did show diplomatic restraint, but the Alien and Sedition Acts damaged his reputation. The political division of his term helped shape the emergent party system and forced Americans to confront questions about free speech, dissent, and the role of opposition in a republic. Though often overshadowed by Washington and Jefferson, Adams played a crucial role in defining the presidency and also testing his presidency against the Constitution. The election of 1800 was another historical moment. So Thomas Jefferson, he wins, and they have the peaceful transition of power against the two rival parties. Both had very fierce campaigning, and you had this internal division between the Federalists. Hamilton attacked Adams. Jefferson is going to win and affirm the reliance of the Constitution and the legitimacy of the opposition of politics. It's going to set this precedent for democratic continuity. Jefferson believes that the strength of the republic, laid in the independent farmers and the local governments. He viewed centralized power with suspicion, and so he's going to work to dismantle the different aspects of Hamilton's financial system. His reforms reflected a commitment to limited government and civic virtue, aiming to make the federal system more responsive to ordinary citizens and not just the elites. Jefferson's presidency is going to usher in a period of one-party dominance. The Federalists lost influence, and the Democratic Republicans are going to shape national policy for the next 2 decades. This is going to be called the Era of Good Feeling, and it's marked by a reduction of partisan conflict, but this unity largely excluded marginalized groups. So political consensus was limited to a very narrow segment of society. So despite Jefferson's democratic rhetoric, the reality of citizenship and voting rights remained deeply exclusive. The Naturalization Act reinforced racial boundaries, and most states limited suffrage to white men with property. Suffrage is voting. New Jersey's brief experiment with women voted ended in 1807 with very narrow political participation. These policies reveal the contradictions that we were talking about earlier in American democracy. Jefferson's presidency reflected both progress and also limitations. While more white men gained political power, systematic barriers based on race, gender, and class still persisted. Native Americans, their sovereignty was routinely violated. Legal structures contained to exclude large portions of the population. Jefferson helped shape this democratic experiment, but its benefits were far from universal. In the early years of the Republic, this political division emerges between Federalist and Democratic Republicans. Again, Federalists favor that strong central government, leadership by elites, and Democrat Republicans promote this limited government with more civil participation kind of spread out in a broader range. And this rivalry is going to shape the foundation of debates about the Constitution, economic policy, foreign alliances. This chart below is just kind of giving you the very core examples and people and information about the two different parties. The election of 1800 marked a peaceful transfer of power and really a turning point in American politics. The Democratic Republicans, who dominated for 2 decades, and the Federalist Party faded. The era of good feelings under Monroe reflected more political unity, but among white male citizens, we're still excluding women and race. So race and gender and class. The Bill of Rights was a critical compromise to ensure ratification of the Constitution. It guaranteed protections for individuals and it clarifies the boundaries of federal authority. However, these rights were largely, again, reserved for white male citizens. So going through this all the way to the Civil War, your main question is based on John Locke's social contract theory that just being born, you had natural rights. But it's going to be a continuous question of who has these natural rights. And it pretty much falls on the white male citizen. And that's going to lead to the Civil War. So the amendments, they do lay the groundwork for future civil rights struggles. They reflect the founders' desire to protect individual freedoms, but again, who is considered the individual that is going to be protected? And they're hoping to prevent tyranny, which is the takeover by a king and absolute power. They're shaped by the different colonial experiences that the colonists had under British rule. So while they also reveal these limitations of early American democracy, they still create a solid foundation that we're going to see is going to be challenged, it's going to grow, and it's going to change. But overall, at this point, many groups are excluded from these protections, but they are beginning to try and create a foundation.